Hello and welcome to Comic Drake, where I talk about comic books and my name is Drake. The video that I made on the best Marvel comics of 2018 was a lot of fun to create, and it was longer than any of the scripted content that I made last year, and this is really hard for me to do as a one-man operation on a weekly basis, and frankly, it didn't get the views that it needed. So I was actually thinking about scrapping this video entirely in favor of something a little bit more clickbaity, like the biggest boobs in comics. Look, the beginning of the year is always at least a little bit barren, especially on Patreon as people are trying to budget for the new year, but a man's still gotta eat.
I've been eating nothing but bread for weeks.
But you know what? So many of you guys requested this video, and I want to share even more positives about this medium that, to hell with the money-making videos, I'm gonna make this anyway. But for my own sanity, I'm gonna try to make this video a little bit shorter and talk about less series, which is a bit of a tragedy because I actually think that DC did better than Marvel overall this year. And what do you know, that's actually a great transition to the obligatory, these are my opinions, it is fine if you disagree disclaimer right here at the beginning of the video. If you don't like a comic that I like, or vice versa, I don't care. This is my video, so now without further ado, let's finally talk about some good books. I love books where the ideals of heroes are taken to extremes, or something traumatic happens which turns them into villains. Even in our real world, pure good and evil doesn't exist, and most of life exists in a gray area. Batman White Knight by Sean Murphy is an alternate universe story that features a reformed Joker who is cured of his insanity, doing his best to save Gotham City from crime, but especially from the collateral damage that Batman leaves in his wake. That alone is a killer premise, but the twists and turns makes this a delight to read, along with interesting takes plural on the character of Harley Quinn. The Batman and Joker relationship is explored in a very deep and nuanced way that we haven't really seen since The Killing Joke, and there are some small plot beats that makes this an extremely new take on the world of Batman that I'd be remiss to spoil. So if you like Batman at all, give this a read. I wholeheartedly think that there isn't a more confusing character in comics than Hawkman. Hell, I have an entire video chronicling his crazy, ridiculous history. But I wanted this character to stay on the shelf and just be utilized for small team-ups, because every single time that he takes the center stage, the attempts to streamline him into a more cohesive character just makes it worse. The new Hawkman series by Robert Venditti not only manages to actually fix Hawkman, but uses his stupidly complex history of reincarnation in the central plot of the book as a mystery. We now know that Carter Hall not only reincarnates throughout time, but space as well. With the trip bringing Hall all over space and time, even meeting up with some past selves, he aims to uncover the mystery of who he is. This is a great book that I didn't know I needed. This is going to be a weird section of the video since I'm not so much talking about one series. The Justice League sort of reinvented itself in 2018 with the launch of Justice League No Justice. It was a great miniseries that needed characters to break up into smaller sub-teams in order to handle a much larger threat, with the chosen characters and dynamics going from the usual to pretty interesting. Following No Justice, the core Justice League book features the cast you'd expect, with subgroups getting their own spin-off titles. Titans kind of counts as one of these subgroups, but them getting involved made their series pretty bad, so let's just pretend that doesn't exist. I love this take on the organization, especially with how it reminds me of that old cartoon Unlimited, but almost all of the books have been quality reads, which allows for underutilized characters to get a time to shine, and even for big-name heroes that aren't usually in team-leading roles to be in charge for a change. I like it, and I hope that this experiment pays off. Following the Metal event in 2017, the publisher decided to launch their new age of DC heroes. I went into these new books with an open mind, excited to see some fresh stories in the DC universe, but almost all of them were not my cup of tea. I totally expected to hate Sideways the most, but to my surprise, he's been the best part of this entire line. What's even more surprising for me is that while Kenneth Rocafort is credited for creating the character and does the majority of the art for the series, Dan DiDio is the writer. I really don't like most of the editorial decisions that DiDio has made in the past, but Sideways feels really out of character for him. It's a lot more upbeat than his trend towards grimdark storytelling, and the narrative plays with Sideways' signature power of opening portals pretty well. I really do think that with a bit more under his belt, Sideways could go on to become a much bigger hero as either a part of a young character ensemble, but more likely as his own thing separate from the rest of the DCU. I mean, reading his book, it feels more like Marvel than DC, so trying to keep him mostly detached would be a good thing. But yeah, surprisingly good series so far, and I'm glad that at least one of their experimental books landed for me. The other book in the New Age lineup that I enjoyed was The Terrifics by Jeff Lemire. I really enjoy Plastic Man, so any book with him in it is one that I pay attention to. And shout out to Gail Simone's miniseries earlier this year. But putting Plastic Man with Mr. Terrific, Metamorpho, and Phantom Girl is just a fun dynamic. Plus, the added shtick of the team being bonded together and can't physically move that far apart from each other is just a neat concept that works well with all the conflicting personalities. This series also features the first appearance of Tom Strong from America's Best Comics in the DC Universe, which is interesting if you know the behind the scenes of him and ABC as a whole. At the very least, this is exposing Tom Strong to a larger audience, albeit in a niche book. I really have been enjoying The Terrifics so far, and it's great that even amongst the new age of DC heroes, some lesser-known heroes are getting utilized once again. Bringing back the original pre-Flashpoint Wally West was one of the best things about DC Rebirth, but I was disappointed that they didn't do too much with him. The 2018 issues of The Flash mostly focused on two things. The first was the Flash War event, which was a pretty good character exploration of Wally, mostly in regards to his relationship with Barry and the lengths that a father would go to in order to save his children. The second is exploring the fallout of the event, specifically the revelation that there's more than just the Speed Force. We also have the Strength, Still, and Sage Forces. The Speed Force as a concept has always fascinated me, but its relationship with the structure of the multiverse does even more. These new forces, although silly, are right up my alley as someone who gets a kick out of multiversal meta concepts. It also adds a decent amount of mystery to the book, with Barry investigating and dealing with these new unpredictable aspects of his world. It's a fun romp and probably the most comic booky of series that DC has put out last year. Hey, was this book 2018? Half of it was. Okay, then I'm counting it. I like Batman, I like Paul Dini's writing, and I like Archie. So come on, Harley and Ivy Meet Betty and Veronica is a mouthful to say, but it is a fun as hell book to read. Harley and Ivy are trying to stop Veronica's dad from destroying a swamp by crashing his gala. But when the night's entertainment, Zatanna and Sabrina accidentally misfire their spells, Harley, Ivy, Betty, and Veronica all swap bodies and hilarity ensues. There is a lot of comedy to be had from the simple clash of tone between the Batman and Archie characters, and plenty with the body swap. If you're in the mood for a quick and fun book that doesn't take itself too seriously, try this. Damian Wayne taking over the Teen Titans for DC Rebirth was a fun ride, but it was starting to get a bit stale with the old team. We're so used to the leading styles of Dick Grayson and Tim Drake that Damian's bossiness was bound to get old at some point. This is why I think that enlisting a more or less whole new team was a smart move. I think that bringing in Red Arrow was maybe a bit unnecessary as she's so similar personality-wise to Damian, but the love triangle that they're setting up with them and Jin interests me since I'm really curious as to how bratty little Damian Wayne is going to handle his first real romance arc. I wasn't too sold on Roundhouse as a character though, since he mostly just seems to serve the role of LOL, aren't YouTubers so wacky? By people who clearly don't understand YouTube. Come on, you expect me to believe that he's famous with only 2,000 buddies? I have 100 times that, and I am nowhere near famous. It's okay, Drake. Breathe. I also wasn't originally sold on Crush, the daughter of Lobo, but a recent issue really helped flesh out her character, and it seems like this book is about to hit its stride. The team is also about to figure out that Robin's been running a secret prison in their base, so I want to see how that plays out. The original comic book tie-in to Injustice Gods Among Us is one of my all-time favorite comics. It was brutal and used pretty much every big concept in the DC universe to tell a massive story with gigantic stakes. It also cemented Tom Taylor as one of my absolute favorite comic writers. While he wasn't on for the end of the series, he was back to write the entirety of the Injustice 2 tie-in, and it shows. Injustice 2 gets to be just as big and fun as the last series, with all sorts of twists and turns. But here are just a few of my favorite moments from the issues in 2018. The best Booster Gold and Blue Beetle writing that we have seen in years, and a super heartwarming end to their friendship. Superboy donning one of Clark's original costumes. The humor continuing to be spot on. And there's also just so many more things that I feel like spoiling here would remove the impact from them. I audibly gasped at one of the character deaths because it came out of left field, was a huge sucker punch to the feels, and it ended with Batman getting into a mech to beat the crap out of General Zod. Just read this freaking book already. Quick honorable mention that I don't want to spend too much time on because the fan base is pretty split regarding Tom King's run on Batman. Besides, I've already covered what I like about his time on the book in my video on Batman and mental health, along with a freaking dedicated episode about one of my all-time favorite recurring jokes of his, Batburger. Obviously, the biggest thing to happen in Batman during 2018 was the wedding to Catwoman not going through, and like I mentioned in my video on the subject, wow, I really have talked about this run a lot. Anyway, I said that even though I didn't like how overhyped the wedding was, how it sort of took over the book, and the overall conclusion of it, I thought the writing was still good, and I'm interested in seeing where it goes. Still one of my favorite DC books of 2018, for sure. Also, I know I've been talking about Batman a lot, but the first issue of the Batman Who Laughs solo series came out at the end of 2018, and it is really freaking good. I don't want to say anything more, just go read it. But why didn't you talk about Doomsday Clock? Is something that I'm sure a lot of you guys are probably leaving a comment on right now. Look, it's not that I'm not enjoying the book, it's that this seems like one of those stories where the ending is going to play a huge part in how you interpret the storytelling as a whole. So I want to wait until it has a definitive conclusion so that I can reread it and then make a proper judgment. In the meantime, it's really neat that we get to see Watchmen characters and the traditional DC Comics characters in one story, so cool. But on that note, I want to reiterate that these are not all of the great books that DC Comics has produced this year. There are plenty more that I could gush on and on and on about, but I don't want to edit this video more than I already have to. I'm already losing a lot of sleep. So if any of these books interested you in any way, shape, or form, then please go give them a read. In fact, let's re-roll that clip from the last video just for good measure.
Support your local comic shop.
Stay frosty, friends. But if you like this video, then why not consider subscribing or even watching another one? And I know I mentioned it several times in this video already, but this is a sequel to the video that I did on the best Marvel comics of 2018. So if you want to know what I thought about those, then maybe click that, give that a watch. Anyway, I hope you learned at least a little something new, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.